Welcome back, everybody. And for those of you who joined in the last few seconds, we will now be inaugurating our first panel for the Women in Fintech Forum. This panel is brought to you by Rapyd, and who are our gold sponsors. With me today are three very distinguished speakers who have a lot of experience in the market and with fintech. We have Ms. Dipika Jaikishan, who is the co-founder and COO of Basis. Ms. Inez, who is the CEO of Financial Alliance for Women, and Lakshmi Rajagopalan, who is the Director for Program Management and Delivery at Rapyd. To start off with, we will have a quick introduction of each of the speakers and then go into the question set. Starting off with Lakshmi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Musheer. Good day to all of you. Thank you so much for being here and dialing in to listen to all of us. I'm Lakshmi. I work for Rapyd, which is a fintech as service unicorn. We are basically a network of payment networks which allow businesses to go to market quite easily with digital payments. So that's our value prop. What I do at Rapyd is I manage complex programs. I am responsible for our strategic clients. I also work on the card operations aspects of the Rapyd business. Prior to Rapyd, I was at PayPal for a decade, and before that, I was at in Chicago working for Orbitz, which is an online OTA. So I've spent all of my career in e-commerce or in payments, and I truly believe that technology is going to be a great enabler in terms of inclusion, not just for women, but every single segment that's underserved or overlooked.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Inez?
Yes, hello, everybody. I'm Inez Murray. I'm the CEO of the Financial Alliance for Women. We are a network of mainly large commercial banks who support one another through peer learning to understand and scale programs that target the women's market. And when we talk about the women's market, we're talking about all segments. And when we're talking about the CVP, we're talking about not just finance, but access to information, financial and business education, networking and recognition. We partnered with Musheer last year on the fintech research. A lot of our, of course, banks are working with fintechs, and we wanted to understand the fintech industry attitudes towards the women's market and what it could do to actually catalyze more players to get involved. So delighted to be on the panel to share some of our ideas about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Inez. And Dipika?
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this conversation today. And I'm very excited to talk about, of course, what we do at Basis, but just being a part of this panel and discuss all that we have coming up for you. Very quickly, Basis is a financial destination for women, which is a fintech platform anchored in education and communities. We are turning latent users who've previously been left out of India's formal financial system into app-informed consumers. Basis actually came from personal pain points, which my co-founder, Henna, and I experienced. She experienced while she was pursuing her master's at Wharton, and I experienced being in the space of wealth management for over 13 years now, how men and women were being treated so differently when it came to all matters related to money. So recognizing this problem is how Basis came to being, and happy to share more about what we do and in the course of this conversation.
Great, thank you all. Now we have made the introductions. What I would like to start off with is a question regarding why we are seeing women being underserved, right? We have women constituting over 50% of the global market in general, controlling 89% of all purchasing decisions, yet they are underserved. What do you think are the primary reasons for this? Lakshmi, would you like to go first on this?
Sure. I think we could spend the rest of the panel just talking about that one topic, but I'll try to address what I think are the top three that are causing women to be overlooked or underserved when it comes to fintech matters. The first one is limiting beliefs by both men and women. Women, I personally know women who prefer or allow the men in their lives to manage their money, whether it comes to wealth management, filing taxes, buying insurance. And some of it, when I ask them about it, say that it's because they don't necessarily have the bandwidth after completing a second shift at home and finishing up a day job, or that they lack confidence because they were not necessarily taught about it when they were growing up. It was always considered to be like a man's job. And I think that needs to change because, well, plenty of reasons, but one of the main one is that women tend to live longer than men. So financial independence has to be something that has taught from the ground up. The second thing that I think attributes to this is the coded patriarchy. The world as we know it for the longest time has been built by men for men. Coded patriarchy has been thousands of years in the making, and it comes through in big and small ways, from things like how seat belt testing, crash dummy tests, airbag tests were predominantly done on male characteristics, caused a bunch of women and men to be injured when airbags were initially rolled out. When you look at language, right, Finnish and Filipino are gender neutral languages. So if you try to go to Google Translate and say, she invests, and then translate that to Tagalog, and then translate that back to English, Google automatically translates that to he invests. And if you do the reverse, right, like if the reverse of it happens when you try something like he is cooking, and you translate that to Finnish and then back to English, it changes it to she is cooking. This is coded into the system. Of course, Google is making efforts to correct that after they've been pointed out. But my point is, it's how it starts, right? So that's the second aspect. And then things are changing, and for the better. Take Bumble, for instance, right? Bumble is basically a dating app for the women, and it completely tackles the limiting belief that women will not make the first move. Their whole thesis is around empowering women both online as well as offline. If you look at the ads that Bumble run, it's around the aspect of empowerment. It says, be the CEO your parents wanted you to marry. It says, we're not playing the field, we're leveling it. And this totally paid out, right? Just taking a product, tailoring it to fit women's need, has paid Whitney Wolford back in billions. She's the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. And she's the youngest person, female billionaire, self-made billionaire in the world. And she's the youngest female to take a company to IPO. So which brings me to my third point, which is that women control 40% of the global wealth. They, as a GDP, are the second largest in the world. They're more than India and China put together. But businesses haven't necessarily opened their eyes to this fact, right? I think there's this whole intention of financial inclusion as a CSR activity, and we need a mind shift that it is no longer that. It's a matter of massive revenue drivers. It's a matter of business opportunity. What you're doing in empowering the female economy is not just good for the world, it's great for the businesses.
Thanks. Sorry, I was on mute. The audio is working. Dipika, what are your thoughts on that? Right, you're based in India,
yeah.
We're almost close to being the largest population in the world, right? It's a lot of records showing there are a lot of underserved women, right, or unserved, in fact. So, what for you are these primary reasons that they have been unserved for a while?
Great. To start with, Musheer, I just wanted to share this stat. It is from a Standard & Poor's research. It is, I think, slightly dated 2016. I want to say there hasn't been an updated number. But I think the first problem starts with the fact that as women, we perhaps think we don't know enough. And as men, they seem to think they know a lot more than us, or at least are confident enough to pretend. But the numbers speak otherwise. Only 27% of urban Indian men and only 20% of urban Indian women are financially literate. So it is literally a 20% gap between both the genders. But yeah, the men do a really good job at pretending they know it all. But having said that, I think, especially speaking of India, a lot of this has been built in culturally, right? Even when I was much younger, perhaps at home by default, the money matters were discussed with my brother, or he was taken to the bank, or he was introduced to, what stocks are. But for me, it actually came from a place of like, when we had a problem, when we lost my father, is when there was this shake-up. And lucky for me, I learned stuff about money that I can now tell women. But yeah, I think starting with cultural problems, and much to what Lakshmi was also saying a little earlier, as women, there are assumptions like we lack the bandwidth or we lack the interest, etc. While I think quite to the contrary, if you look at research and you talk to women, of course, women are more keen to learn than men. There is a lot that we put into understanding investments. There is a lot that we try to understand when it comes to something as simple as risk profiling, and we'll talk about a little later in the conversation. And C is the default, right? Which again, Lakshmi was talking in, and I think some part alluding to The Invisible Woman, the book. I think all financial products, especially so, have been built to fit men. It's not one size fits all, it's one size fits all men. And that's where the biggest problem lies. Yeah.
Thanks. Inez, we've spoken since the last year. We continue to engage on looking at how we can better get not just fintechs, but financial services companies to cater better to women. And I've learned so much personally, like things when we were pointed out about how banks were built in downtowns, which limited women's ability to come in, and nobody would have thought about it as something that I wasn't consciously thinking about, something like that, right? What do you feel from a financial alliance perspective and your experience in the space? Why has there been so much not been so much service for women over the last 50 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think to build on what the other speakers have said in terms of lack of, let's say, design thinking, and also consciousness about the fact that, women do have different attitudes and behaviors when it comes to financial services. So when we did another piece of research, actually, Musheer, about 4 years ago with banks, what we found was kind of basically 4 myths. So the first one was, that there is actually, well, first of all, the main thing is that there's lack of awareness, right? So this idea that bank leaders are actually not aware that there is a women's market, that in fact we do have distinct needs. And when we talk about behaviors, and when you look at those needs and behaviors, it's what the other speakers have spoken about in terms of, women tend to want more than a simple transaction. They want to have a relationship with their financial services provider, generally speaking. They want to, they're avid users of information, so they need timely and relevant information. They generally report less confidence in financial matters. So they self-report this. So they need financial and business education. They're generally less networked. So they need, a community to be networked in. And of course, we all know about a lack of role models. And so this idea of putting them forward and recognizing them. So there's kind of this idea that if they do need something different, then all they need is pink products, which is exactly what they don't want. Women don't want to be, they find that derogatory in many markets. And of course, fintechs need to do research in their own markets where they're targeting. Also, women are not a segment. They are the majority of the population. And within that, more than half of the world's population, there are many, many subsegments. And so it's very important then to segment that market. Also, perception in financial circles that women are less profitable. There are market segments. If you look at the SME space, there's this whole. First of all, SME banking would be probably the least favored any bank to work in. But within that, then women are very much viewed as being more likely to be semi-formal businesses or informal, less profitable, and so on and so forth. So they're not really looking at what we know and we found in the fintech research, the lifetime value. If you look at all of the metrics in terms of performance of women customers over time, if they're served well, they are the chief purchasing officer in their households. They are the ones that are looking at intergenerational support. They are looking after their parents as well as their children. So they are really the gateway into kind of a massive kind of household purchasing system that if they're catered to well, they will, they'll be very profitable for you. And we see that in our own membership. We see the products per customer, women surpass men, they're more loyal, they pay back loans better, they save more with the institution. There's so many good behaviors that if the fintechs in this audience really went out and understood them better, they would have a very viable market.
Building on that, and I think it's a good follow-up, would be, we did the report, we were looking for what could be the opportunity in the multi-trillion-dollar economy. Based on your personal experience, where do you see as the best opportunities for fintechs to cater to the women's market? What could be the low-hanging fruit that they could target?
Well, I think it's all over the map. If you look at in terms of the verticals, so we looked at the 7 main verticals, and what we found was that in the wealth space, for instance, that was the vertical that had the least percentage of women customers. And as some of our speakers have already spoken, the trends in wealth are phenomenal. I mean, we are seeing the biggest transfer in wealth in human history occur right now between the baby boomers and the next generation, and the majority of that wealth is going to women. So why is that? Because women inherit twice. They inherit first from their parents and second from their husbands. They are also starting up businesses at greater rates than men are, and they're doing it more for opportunistic reasons than simply reasons around, they have to. So there's a lot of self-made wealth now, which means that they're a viable and huge market. So you look at Alves, for instance, and they're one of the first fintechs to go out there with the wealth proposition. So wealth is a big one. Credit and lending, we're seeing less. I mean, women are vastly underserved in credit. And so, just if you look at, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, over 50% of SMEs are women-owned, and they get less than 10% of the credit. So there's a massive credit market that they're underserved. Believe it or not, payments and remittances report less than 50% female customers. And then those with more than 50%, personal finance management, as you can imagine, that's the go-to. Obviously, women are managing daily expenses and all that stuff. So that's doing quite well. But I think there's lots of ways to add value. InsurTech, similarly, and digital banking, of course. And with the last year, the acceleration to digital has been phenomenal. And if we look at one of our members, for instance, HBL Pakistan, the largest bank in Pakistan, we're seeing that a really rapid increase in the percentage of women being included through digital channels, because they do not, of course, have the same kind of mobility and freedom in some countries as they do to go to the branches and so on. So there's lots and lots of upside, and I encourage you to look into all of them.
Thanks, Inez. Lakshmi, I'm going to bring you in here. Inez also mentioned about how a significant majority, or at least more than 50% of payments and remittance market has women in it, or women users. Rapyd is a global payments player, and you deal with all types of fintechs or catering to across the world. Payments is probably the most fundamental of financial services, going back to eternity when people were exchanging rocks or food as a barter or a system of payments. It plays a big role in everyday life. Can you share some of the insights on women users and how payment firms are catering to them? What needs to change to better serve this market?
Sure, thank you. So I'm gonna start with Singapore and then kind of expand it to the larger pool. So in Singapore, home-based businesses are seeing a rapid, significant growth, and largely because of COVID-19. And micro businesses and home-based businesses are a majority women-led businesses. So if you look at sewing, hairdressing, baking, e-commerce, all of these spaces are seeing a rapid growth to the online channels because of jobs displacement, as well as the lockdowns that have been in place for the market. So one of the things that contactless consumption requires is contactless payments, and therefore digital payments in this space is of massive importance, right? What Rapyd has done during the circuit breaker that was here was we had a solidarity program with Singapore, which allowed for, which was targeted at mostly startups, small businesses, as well as non-profits, but wasn't for all Singapore-based businesses, which allowed for like 0 transaction fees. So it was for the first 100,000 Singapore dollars of processing volume. This was basically done. The express purpose of this was to allow businesses to go cashless and be able to send and receive payments in a real-time fashion, make sure that their working capital was taken care of, right? So from that point of view, I think payment companies definitely move the needle when it comes to allowing additional market opportunities, targeting segments that are outside of the immediate vicinity of those businesses. So that's one thing that I can think of where payments definitely moves the needle on financial inclusion for women. Going more broadly, there are 2 other things that I want to talk about. Women make most of the day-to-day payments, and we've talked about this. They also make like the recurring payments, whether it's school fees, whether it is insurance, whether it's cable or utility bills, or and in emerging markets, having digital payments is not just a matter of convenience. It's actually the difference between taking time off from your primary responsibilities, be it caregiving or losing income from not being able to go to work, just so you make a trip somewhere to pay bills, right? So that's another way in which payments is really kind of changing the game, and for women especially. And then the last one I'll touch upon is on remittance, especially as it pertains to migrant workers. So when we say migrant workers, immediately the picture that comes to mind for most people is in construction or in like agricultural sector. But what about the nurses and doctors that travel internationally and work in a different country? What about engineers? What about nannies? World Bank estimates that 47% of migrant workers are women, and a majority of them send money back home. To the extent that it's actually the backbone of some of these emerging markets. In World Bank estimates that in 2019, about 27% of Nepal's GDP was incoming remittances. It was about 10% in Philippines. Digital remittances are, again, World Bank estimate that they're less than half of the banks or the high street money exchange brokers, right? The fact that if we're able to move the needle, have more women have financial literacy, have access to internet, have access to faster, cheaper remittances, the more money that stays within the women's pocket. And women tend to invest on the next generation. Any additional money that comes into their hands goes to their children's welfare or their education, which unlocks the potential for more to come. So I think those are the ways where we're seeing that, how payment changed the landscape, especially for women inclusion. In terms of what needs to change, I think there's an awareness issue. I think Inez had mentioned it earlier, and Dipika also alluded to it in terms of literacy, right? I think stories of success highlighting the fact that these are the opportunities that are available to you. Women being able to see role models who they can relate to and understand opportunities that are otherwise not available to them in terms of e-commerce through digital payments, I think would be a big, big win. The second thing I think that would be of importance is digital identity. In order to unlock all of the advantages of digital payments, you need a digital identity. And women by far lag in this space when it comes to having a digital identity. So in this particular situation, I think it's a government push which is of the utmost importance, the way that India has done with the rollout of Aadhaar, which has really moved the needle in terms of adoption, accelerating the number of women who have bank accounts and are exposed to how that can benefit their life. And maybe the last one I would say is, I think banks and money exchange should look at their rates, because if fintechs can do it for less than half, why can't they?
Because they like the spread. Dipika, coming to you, one of the things that Lakshmi mentioned was about education, and I've been following Basis for a while, and one of the things you do so well is the focus on education and investor education to help achieve financial independence. How important is it in your mind for fintechs to educate their women users, right? For many fintechs, there's always this, and we've seen this across ecosystem, not necessarily only in India, but there is this need to acquire customers as fast as possible. And what I call the self-fulfilling spiral, where if the early adopters are men, then you start catering to those users, and then it becomes more and more alienating the women users, by which time you had lost them within a few months. So how can they achieve their growth balanced with financial education to onboard women users?
Sure, Musheer, just first to talk about this one point. I think this is an LVest number which said that 61% of women would rather talk about death, their own death, than money, and that is a problem, right? I think the need for education starts right there. While I could not entirely speak on behalf of other fintechs, if I was specifically to talk about Basis, I think that's exactly what we identified, that getting somebody to come and transact on your platform is perhaps the easiest thing to do, but it is not going to be an affinity-based platform. They may not come to you, and just in the context of India, people move from Paytm to Google Pay to Phone Pay fairly quickly, that transition, because there was nothing holding you back to that platform. And especially so when it comes to women, if we're not being educated on making the right decision, we're not going to come back to you. It's easy to go on a platform, buy an insurance policy, make a mutual fund investment, but we do that only after we learn, understand, and then we act. So if we're not educating, you're not teaching, and not helping them then act, it's a problem. And I know, and then this is a constant debate. We're also a startup, right? So it's always, do you want to go deep or do you want to go broad? And it was a very conscious decision we took, that we want to go deep into understanding women's behaviors, preferences, and then it's much easier to go broad. I think in terms of scale, that's always going to be pressure, but both as a company and as investors, they're always going to see numbers. But guess what? You'd rather have a few users who love you than lots of users who perhaps come back to you once in a while. And I think a lot of fintech products, again, especially in India, there is, of course, growth through advertisements, etc., but a lot of it is organic. If I speak about us itself, I think about 35% of our growth in the last 6 months has been organic growth, which means education and educating them is really the right route into going. And you know what? This is perhaps going to be my last point. If you're educating that woman, she is going to keep coming back to you, and the LTV of that user is much longer. She's going to come back to you when she's 25, just getting started with investments, at 28, perhaps when she's getting married, at 32, when she's considering having a child, and a little later, perhaps just wanting to do her whole retirement planning. So educating a woman is really retaining that user for life. Otherwise, you're no better than a transaction platform.
Fair enough. It's also a longer term hook because you're learning more and you're staying there because you understand when you keep coming back. It's a bit like having a personal banker, right? You go to the personal banker not because of necessarily only the deals. It's also about what they understand, what they bring to the table, and they are able to align with you. I'm going to now throw a question to all three of you. You can take a little time for it, but it's a question about what have been your personal experiences while using fintech products. You're not allowed to talk to your own companies. So Lakshmi and Dipika, no Rapyd and Basis. But when you're dealing with, prior to working here or setting up your own fintechs, what has been your experience and what do you wish was different and can be improved? I know, Dipika, you've gone and done some with Basis, but besides in the wealth space, what would be there? So why don't we start off with Lakshmi on this?
Sure. So I'm not going to talk about Rapyd, but I am going to talk about a Rapyd client. So I hope that fits within the rules. So the most recent fintech product that I used and was delighted with was the GoTrade platform. Now, I am aware that micro in fractional investment or shares has been growing as a product. There's a lot of press around this. There's a lot of activity that's happening in this space. But it was not until very recently when I got a nudge from one of our clients, GoTrade, that I actually downloaded the app and tried it. And I was so impressed with it that it's super easy. I don't have to plunk down $1,000 if I want to invest in Shopify. I can do it with $10, $50, or whatever I feel comfortable investing in that stock counter for that month, right? So it just made it so the app was super intuitive to use. It was, like I said, it really opened my eyes to that there are financial products, and they've come like far in the space that we're now playing in. So I think that would be my fintech product that I've most recently used and really been delighted with. In terms of what could we do better, I'm gonna beat that awareness drum, right? I feel like if more women knew you could purchase gold online, it's backed by actual gold. If more women knew that you could do fractional trading, and you could do it while commuting on your bus to your place of work, or taking your kids to the park, and do it in those areas instead of having to like carve out time that has to be in front of a laptop or whatever. I think it will change the game. There will be a massive uptake once women realize how simple, how easy, and how it can fit in within their daily activities. I think people, fintechs haven't necessarily done a great job in kind of explaining that to people that can afford it and take that step. Dipika.
Thank you. Dipika.
Yeah, I think, Musheer, to this question, when it comes to personally what experiences I feel I've had which were good or bad, let's talk about the bad first. I think when it comes to fintech platforms, there is a lack of relatability, and at times you do feel, and I'm not talking about the payment platforms, let's stick to the realm of wealth management platforms. There is lack of relatability. There is a feeling that the advice that you're getting is not coming space of empathy. You question whether that advice is right for you, and it's definitely not friendly or easy to understand. Again, the content, if you talk about it, it is so deadpan. Being in the business of finance, it is so boring even for me sometimes to read that content. So as women users, we don't have that much time. You have limited time. You're juggling between 1,000 things at home and at work. You have 10 minutes. You want to learn, hey, how do I get started on investing in stocks? But you don't watch a 30-minute YouTube video to do it. If somebody's able to tell that to me very quickly, I would go back to them again and again. So I think understanding that women want quick, digestible, palatable information is a huge problem, which is not being addressed. I think, and this is something, and I know I'm not supposed to talk about basis, but I do want to talk about this one aspect which we got as feedback. And again, it was web building for women. So for us, it was an unconscious move we were making. But we got this feedback, hey, y'all address your users as her or she or hers. So just changing those pronouns has had such a huge impact. And they're like, oh, that makes us feel so much more comfortable. Where the default on every other platform is him or his, or it's defaulted to men, even the words that we use. I think starting with that, and there are so many blind spots which are not being addressed. And you know what Inez was talking about earlier, I think, and in India, what we call it defying stuff. There is a pink credit card, and of course, we're in Women's History Month. So this month there are like brokerage houses in India saying no commissions for women, and that's just tokenism, and we can see through that. So understand that we see through this. I don't want to use the word, but we can see through this BS. We don't need it once in a year. We need constant education. We're smart enough to make our decisions. And guess what? Give us what you can in the most empathetic manner, and we're ready to lap it up.
Inez, what are you looking to get? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of what the prior speakers have said are hugely important. I'll talk about, when we've gathered the collective demand side research from our members and we put it into a database and analyzed it. And kind of the main themes are, as we said, no pink marketing. Women have no time. So you really have to consider being on point, relevant information, all of that. There's a general lack of trust. So this whole empathy piece is very important. Women want a relationship. I keep saying that, not a transaction, and they will stay with you if you give that. You have to embed financial and business education as a core piece of the value prop, however you do that. And you also have to embed networking. And then comes to the whole marketing piece. You have to take what we call a gender intelligent approach to that. And actually in the report, we point out that, word of mouth, by the way, is the most effective way. There's a saying in Australia with one of the members there called Westpac that they found that when women were unhappy with their financial services provider, they told 43 people. When they're happy, they tell 9 other people. So net promoter score is what you're really looking for, and you're only going to get that if you actually follow some of the known data now around being gender intelligent and supporting women.
Thank you. I think we have time for one quick question. We did answer about a bit on the COVID side, but I'm going to probably take one question, which is from Kanchan on what are the challenges to entering this huge women market in developing and developed world, right? Would any one of you want to take it before we close? Lakshmi, you want to go?
I think in terms of developing and developed, I did address one piece of which was around remittances. So as I said, Nepal is a huge incoming remittance market. So if there is work around that to reduce cost, because it can be done. We've seen that it can be done. So that would be one of the things that I would say. And then the second piece, I think, is on the digital identity. I feel so privileged that I live in Singapore, where everybody that I know has that identity that they can use and go get access to financial services quite easily. I think in some of the emerging markets, this is a huge challenge. And there are cultural aspects to it. There are infrastructural aspects to it. There are technological aspects to it. And therefore, investing on this is really for the long term, but it's going to be so massive. So I think those two would be like two of my key things that would address and move the needle in a significant way.
Inez, want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I agree. The whole the whole infrastructure to enable women to be financially included, that's really important. Policy and regulatory frameworks to enable to enable more ease that the players can test and move into the market. I would say there's actually a lot of similarities between, for instance, women business owners in emerging markets as well as developed. If you look at data, it's very similar challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing, regardless of where they're located. So I think there's a massive opportunity there to really unpack that and to really understand how we can, for instance, fully underwrite smaller loans. And I'm not talking about microfinance level loans or SME loans. I'm talking about the missing middle, where the majority of women entrepreneurs are, and where, in fact, if we want to support local households and economies, that's who are putting food on the table in many countries. So it's those entrepreneurs, of which the majority are women owned and led, that really need that support. And I think fintech can play an enormous role in actually unpacking and picking out pieces of that and solving for that, but more of the larger commercial players can go in and serve that segment.
Thank you so much, all three of you. I think it's been very, very insightful looking at how we can cater not only better to women from services perspective, but a holistic perspective. Right? It's not just a matter of saying, hey, here we fixed our product, but you've got to bring in a whole ecosystem here to provide better access. And it's not just a matter of financial inclusion, it's a matter of actually leaving, as they would say, right, leaving profitability on the table. And you can actually make quite a bit of money if you tweak it. It's a segment of the market, second largest GDP, as Lakshmi mentioned at the start, and it's ripe for fintechs to take the opportunity. So thank you, Lakshmi, Inez, and Dipika. It's been delightful to moderate this panel with you, and thank you for joining us for this panel.
Thank you, Musheer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
To the audience, we'll soon be starting our next session, which will be talking about why fintechs, how can we provide a digital customer journey for women users? We will have Jessica Lam from B-Lab, Ifioma Uda from Shecluded, Ayosha Gupta from Meraki, and Leanne Konhardy joining us soon. So stay tuned in 30 seconds and we'll be back up. Thank you.